So now it is my honor to introduce to you this distinguished audience. The best friend Israel has ever had in the White House, our President William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I thank the New Israel Fund for your mission. I wanted to come here to support it. And I want us to leave most of the time for the questions that Leslie has. You know, the great thing about my being out of office is I can say exactly what I think. And the terrible thing about it is it doesn't matter to anybody anymore. So it's sort of a good news, bad news deal, you know, you take it when you can. So if you live in a world where you can't escape each other, I would argue to you, this is what you ought to think about. Interdependence is never enough. The Arabs, the Palestinians and the Israelis are not a bit less interdependent today than they were when Yitzhak Rabin was alive and we were making peace, or in 1998 when Israel astonishingly had a handover of government from Prime Minister Netanyahu to Prime Minister Barak, and it's the only year in the entire history of the State of Israel where nobody was killed by a terrorist attack. Are the Israelis and the Palestinians less interdependent today? Of course not. You know, we may have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 dead Palestinians and over 900 dead Israelis, but all it does, it just proves the point. It doesn't disprove it. And the point I wish to make is you cannot settle for interdependence. You have to move anytime you're in an environment where there is negative interdependence and you cannot kill, jail, or occupy all your adversaries and control their every move. You have to make a deal. You have to have politics. You have to move from interdependence to integration, to an environment of shared benefits and shared responsibilities based on a shared sense of community, rooted in the simple notion that our differences make life interesting, but our common humanity is more important. You may think that sounds naive. It is the only way to survive in a world where we are interdependent and we cannot escape each other. Now, you know, Peter and I were laughing about, I'm going to get him in trouble now. He was bragging on one of his sons who may or may not be here tonight, and he said, if you see him, I will kill you if you tell him what I just told you, because our kids don't want us to brag on them anymore. It's embarrassing, right? And I was thinking, it wasn't so very long ago when Peter and I were that young. It doesn't take long to live a life. And those of us who've been fortunate to have a fair span of years, I've reached a point where literally the thing that matters most to me in life is I don't want anybody younger than me to die who doesn't just have to. I just don't want anybody younger than me to die anymore. And I know this all sounds painfully simple, and you may think it's simplistic, but the whole world is awash in kids that are dying because their elders are too damn proud to do what they need to do to think about giving the kids a different future. And, you know, I thought about that 1,000 times in various contexts, including why we didn't make peace in the Middle East at the end of my term. But I thought, in view of the fact that Arafat stiffed Barak at the end of my term and didn't take the parameters that I put out, I thought that we needed another way of going at this. So the president came up with this roadmap, and they were working on that, and then you all know what else happened. I won't bore you with the details. But here, the answer to whether what Prime Minister Sharon is doing is good or not depends on what he does next. But if Ariel Sharon says, look, I spent my whole life fighting terror. You may not agree with everything I did, but we are where we are. This intifada has been madness, and it's been madness for the for the Palestinians and bloody for the Israelis. And I want to show you that we have no interest in being an occupying power. Sharon said that. This wasn't Rabin. This wasn't Barak. Sharon said he did not want to be an occupying power. He should get credit for that. But what he has to do now is to show them, not that he's going to ease up on terror. I'm all for kicking people who are trying to blow your kids to pieces. I'm for that. But he has to, but Rabin had a formulation. This is the point. Rabin had this formulation. He said, I will fight terror as if there were no negotiations, but I will negotiate as if there were no terror. And I think we ought to try to help Abu Allah succeed, not undermine him. We ought to try to make it possible for Abu Allah to bring back the young leaders that I know perfectly well. At the end of 2000, and Martin does too, were pleading with Arafat to take the deal that I put out there. Pleading with him. There's a lot of support among the younger Palestinians for an honorable peace, and including people who are tough and skilled enough to fight terror for you. Let me just go back to what you do. Now you think about this. We're here tonight to celebrate your work in Israel. If you ask, let's forget about the Middle East for a minute. If you ask me, what's the most important thing that's happened in the world when you were president that did not get in the headlines?
Great question.
You said, what's the most important thing that happened in the world when you were president that did not get in the headlines? I would say two things. One is, for the first time in history, more than half the world's people lived under government they voted in. Two is the explosion of civil society, of the non-governmental organizations. That's what Peter's wife runs the Children's Defense Fund. It's now, if we were not in America, we'd call it an NGO somewhere else. Okay. One of the biggest problems in the whole Arab world, and certainly among the Palestinians, outside of Israel, the non-Israeli Palestinians, is the absence of civil society, right? The absence of organizing, countervailing groups. Organized ways for people to relate to one another and to establish what the great Harvard sociologist Robert Putnam calls social capital, rules, networks, and trust, that enables people to connect to one another and get up every day and think that today is going to be like yesterday was. If you have no rules, networks, and trust, it's hard to do that. So that's what I think you ought to think. To me, I would be looking at, I think we could do so much more good to make this thing come out well in the long run by imagining whether there is more and more and more we can do with the Palestinian population to build civil societies and to build rules, networks, and trust than whatever does or doesn't happen in Iraq. Most of you can't do anything about that anyway, so there's no point in worrying about it.
Mr. President, that was fabulous, as you know. This is Israel's Declaration of Independence, which we're presenting to you. It underlies everything that NIF does. And so we want to give this to you, and small token of thank you for being here tonight with us.
Thank you.